We're sitting down with Pete Lehman today, who is a dairy farmer in Middlebury, Indiana, organic dairy farmer, and happy to sit down with him and talk a little bit about succession planning and how he's gone about transitioning the farm over to his son. And we're going to get into that, but first, Pete, you want to do a little bit of an introduction of how you got into farming and how long you've been organic and all that kind of background stuff?
Yes, this is Pete Lehman. Like Brian said, we started farming in 86 when we got married. We had 10 years with Dad. We farmed together in shares. And we transitioned to organic in 2003. We started our transition, got certified 2006. So we've been organic 11 years now. That's with my wife, Lena. And we got 7 children, 1 girl and 6 boys. So we had those helping on the farm through the years. And now we're up to, we own 173 acres with 114 acres tillable, milking approximately 60 cow herd. That's what milking cows, 60 cows. And now we're down to our, like I said, like a succession planning, and we're into it right now with our son Jay, who got married last August.
And now with the succession planning, let's just dive right into it. So you started with, how long ago did you start looking at turning the farm over to Jay?
Well, this has been going through my mind for probably 10 years at least, or better. We put in a milking parlor in 2006, and that was weighing heavily on my mind back then. As, like I said, the kids helped a lot on the farm, but I seen where we were going to run out of help. And I wanted to put in a parlor where my wife and I could do the milking and incorporate another couple. And to do that, I knew we had to up our cow numbers and have a more cash flow, or the amount of cash flow, so we can handle 2 families on the farm. So we've been working towards that probably longer than I want to admit. I guess I didn't realize I was planning that long till my son-in-law told me, well, 10 years ago, you were talking about how we're going to transition the farm. So I guess we've been working on it for a while, but it boiled down to about a year ago, probably about a year before we really dove into what we need to do. We started thinking about it. And so we kind of started with the youngest one. And at his age, he was like 17. He didn't think he wanted to commit, even though he wanted to farm, but the timing was off. And so was our 19-year-old. And our son Jay, who is with us now, he got married in August, and that's right in the middle of our planning. He had bought a farm, or a 4-acre place, house and barn, down the road about a half a mile, the back end of the farm. So he was kind of the next one in line. So after the other 2 turned it down, we decided to go that route. But then we were trying to figure out how we're going to do this without producing X amount of cash as far as taxes go, income taxes and all that. And I was at a succession meeting up in Organic Valley. They had one there with that lawyer. I don't recall his name. I don't know.
Can't think of it either, but yeah, I know who you're talking about.
That really got my mind spinning what we need to do, and started thinking. So we met a lawyer, and then went to a tax person who repairs taxes, Randy Fry. He helped us out. He said, "What do you guys want to do?" So here we are. How do we get around these without paying all these income taxes and all that good stuff? So what we did, we sat down and he asked us what we wanted to do, and we told him our goals, and he came up with forming an LLC. So what we did, we formed Sunrise Acres LLC. That is all the cattle, all farm equipment, well, actually all equipment and the cattle. That's Sunrise Acres LLC. And my wife, Lena, and I, we own the farm. So to make things possible without the farm producing so much cash and paying him X amount of dollars so he can afford to buy the farm and this equipment, we will gift him and his wife, Michelle, about $45,000 a year from this LLC, which is about 10%. In 10 years, what we do is he gets his living expenses, cash. We pay him enough for his living expense to make his payment. And then 10% of the LLC will be gifted to him for the rest of his labor. We can't say for the rest of his labor, technically and legally, but that's what's happening. So in 10 years, if he works here, he'll own the LLC. So that is kind of the plan, and we get paid out of the LLC. The LLC pays us as though we work wherever, enough to cover our living expenses. And the mortgage on the farm and all equipment, all the buildings will get paid by the LLC, and that is called rent to me for the use of my farm. So this enables us to transition ownership of the farm without all the taxes. If I'd have to pay him enough so he could buy the, so to speak, $500,000 worth of cattle and equipment, we gift it to him. If we pay enough so he could buy it, he'd be paying income taxes, and when we sell, we'd be paying income taxes. So this enables us to do the transition, the succession thing, without producing a lot of cash on the farm.
Sure. Well, okay, there's a lot in there. So let's step back all the way to just kind of the logistics, first of all, on starting with your youngest son. That's something that I've always been a little bit interested in. Within Amish culture in particular, it seems that you start with the youngest child to see if they would like to farm, and then move up and whoever is interested. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Well, that's an interesting thing I've noticed in my younger years, and as I got older, I was trying to figure out, why some of these successions seemingly work more successful than others, and why does one thing happened that I noticed at one farm was the oldest one was at home, and the parents were telling. Actually, we were visiting about it, and she said, "Well, we're in the way of the younger people of moving on because we are just. They could use our house for the next generation." And I was trying to figure out, why is it this way? But and we've had that with my dad here. I'm 25 years younger than my dad, and he's still living here. And if Jay wouldn't have bought that house down there, we would have to build another house. Actually have to have 3 houses on the farm, kind of the way as Amish moved the succession of we take care of our parents and so forth. So if you take the youngest one and move him on the farm, by the time he gets up there and gets married, we'll be older, and we'll have more years in between, and things just work better in the succession. If the closer they're the same age, the more friction is apt to be caused, or I don't know how to explain it. The older you are, the more ready you are to let go, and just stand back and let it happen. If you're young enough and got enough energy left, you're more apt to get in the other person's way. So I think without really realizing, I guess I was figuring that one out, and I didn't know what I was looking for.
And I think if you look at, the average Amish family, they generally get married fairly young, younger than mainstream America. So when the oldest child would be ready to take over the farm, you're still a relatively young man. So bringing somebody like that into the operation at your age, so I think it's just kind of a natural evolution to the younger one in the family because of starting families younger, and then there's generally a decent spread over the length of the kids. So by the time the younger ones are older, you're much more closer to be looking at succession. When your oldest one is ready to really take charge, well, you're still a strapping young lad at that time.
That and another thing that comes into play there is siblings on the farm. That has caused a lot of family feuds already. As the oldest one coming home, and there's younger ones there, and he's wanting them to help, and they don't care to help, and some of those family things you want to avoid if you can.
Hmm. Well, it sounds, I mean, once you describe it, it makes a lot of sense, but traditionally, it's usually the oldest, the oldest child takes on the responsibility. That's traditional way of thinking, but you guys are just thinking further ahead is what I mean, actually playing it all out and before it actually happens is what I'm kind of hearing. So it makes a lot of sense once you hear it, but I just was kind of curious why that line of thinking was there. Okay, so let's then move on to took a year ago. One of the things, gifting $45,000 worth of property. Is that just based off of the taxable maximum?
Yes, there's you're allowed $24,000 per. My wife can do it, I can do it, and then we use Jay and Michelle both.
Okay.
So that's almost maxed out, but not quite. What we did, we just took the LLC, the cattle and the equipment, because he's another part I wanted to do that was he's only 22 years old now, so he doesn't have a lot of money, and plus he's buying his own place down there. So to me, it just made sense to get him on his feet, because I also want some money for my farm. He can't pay for the farm if he doesn't have a business. So that was, and so far as, and I still struggle a little bit with this idea of giving them, when I went out pricing all of my equipment and the cattle and horses and, and harnesses and everything that's out there, the tool shed, and, I struggle a little bit. It's a mind thing. I thought I was prepared for this, and the day I went out doing that, when I came in, I told my wife I'm awfully disappointed in myself that I felt the way I did. Because there's got to be a lot of trust and giving up or whatever you want, a lot of trust and wanting to work together. And because all of a sudden trusting this one person with all your belongings, and it was, I don't know, it was I struggled for a couple of days, but we're not here to be millionaires. What would I want with all that money? After I'm gone, I won't take it with me. So I struggle a lot with that, and I still struggle sometimes a little bit, but my needs are being met. I got money to live. I got plenty of money to live, and Jay's thought is you need enough money that you need to take off and do some traveling and stuff like that. So that's a good feeling. And what more do I want? Really, what more do I want? I've got a house, and like the LLC, he lives down there, but he gets all his milk here. He gets his eggs here because the LLC pays for that stuff. His hay for his horses. And all that stuff gets furnished because it's part of the business. Mm-hmm. So I don't know. I guess I struggle with it sometimes. Then again, the next thing I'm trying to tell me, what more do I want?
Mm-hmm. Now, the one thing, you probably never want to think about this, but is there a safeguard in place if, let's say, in 3 years from now, he decides he does not want to do this? Is there something in place were that to happen?
Yes. We went to the lawyer, and we talked about things we didn't want to talk about. Mm-hmm. That's all written up. And so is it, he can't just turn around and sell that stuff either, because he's got siblings. And what we're doing with the siblings to trying to help them out is we've got like 35, 40 acres in the back that's on a separate deed. And I use that as equity for them to get them started early in life. So far as when they want to buy a farm, I can sign their mortgages with that equity to get them going. Like my oldest son just bought 2 huge duck barns and a house and a barn, and that would have never been possible if we wouldn't have had money to help him out. And so is with Jay when he bought that, and my other son, his other place. We've got enough equity, and that's what we're trying to do. Now, money, monetary, we're not forking over a $500,000 family because we don't have it. But we've got equity that we can use to get them started earlier in life, to get them on a place and get paying that, and that inflation will help them get started. So that's kind of how we treat that, and they're all well and happy with that.
Because in any time there's succession with multiple siblings, you have to have an uncomfortable conversation and talk about things you'd rather not talk about. I think that's a very important part of it, and I see times when that doesn't happen. Because before we started here, we were talking about in-laws not having the tie to the farm, where mom and dad's farm, my brother-in-law is in the process of buying that now, but I have a real connection to it. An in-law won't have that connection. So that's an interesting dynamic to deal with when there's multiple children and in-laws involved.
And probably, I don't know if the Amish get as much involved as the non-Amish would. I don't know, but traditionally, there's one, we know there's one of the children are going to get the farm, and only one. So this has been kind of interesting because my 2 youngest sons, when they, I don't know, first, second, third grade, when they were playing in the parlor, I heard them arguing who's going to get the farm. So now none of them's really in that position, but they understand that. That was their choice, even though they were young, but we couldn't wait. Time is, at the time where you're in, that's what you got to make, the decisions you got to make. It is what it is. And it was very interesting. I didn't realize, but after everything was, my daughter, except my daughter, she's on a farm. She's the oldest one. But all the other boys would have gone for the chance to get on the farm and farm at home here with us. So that was very, that felt good. But they're okay with it now. It got a little tight, there was a little tension for a little bit, but they got over, they realized it is what it is, and they got no problem with it.
But in the Amish family and the succession is a different dynamic because you don't put grandma and grandpa or mom and dad into a home. Part of the deal with getting the farm is you're going to take care of mom and dad, if it's possible to take care of them, until they pass away. I mean, that is part of the deal. So sometimes that eliminates some of the siblings as well because you might not necessarily want to take care of mom and dad. So I think that's a dynamic that isn't outside of the Amish and the Plain community as much. I mean, sure, there's instances, but not on 99% like it is here.
Yes, well, that's part of, that's still part of the deal when we talked about this is you'll get the farm. Well, we haven't made a price on the farm yet, but my intention is he'll get a fair price that he'll be able to farm and pay for it. But I'll be living here, and he'll be furnishing my meat, eggs, milk. He'll feed my horse. That's the deal I had with Dad, and I don't regret that at all. I think it's a good deal. Actually, I lived in the other house, and the house is mine, and I did all the repairs and paid all the taxes and everything. So, and I think that's a fair shake. The older we get, the less income we have. Why not make it that way? So that's another part of it, the equation, like you said, Mike. That's definitely another part of it.
Now, you change a lot of diapers when you're young, so turnabout's fair play, right?
Yeah. Yep. There you go. But I was, before we did this LLC, I didn't know, and I'm still not sure how it all turned out, but we still got, most of us Amish, now not all of them, but most of us Amish don't, we're not on Social Security. So once we quit working, our income stops. So, and I've been rolling around, this thing around my head for a long time. How can we set this up that I'll have income as long as I live? How do you do that? So this is also part of that plan. I might not be sitting here with $1 million in the bank, but as long as I got equity or own part of the farm where I can draw a little bit of income from my living expenses is my goal.
So how does the LLC, okay, so you kind of went over the basics of that, the cattle and the machinery, and then it allows Jay to pay you essentially rent for the farm you own, which will be your income as you retire, right? Mm-hmm. So were there any other options presented to you besides an LLC? What were they? Or was LLC basically just what fit and what the accountant said, yeah, this is what you want?
Well, basically the LLC was about the only practical option.
Okay. Because
of what we wanted to do. I wanted to work on the farm, and Jay wanted me to work on the farm. And this farm has practically always been multi-generational. I worked with my dad for 10 years before he kind of retired out of it, and I bought him out, and he worked out there for a couple of years. But there's no work here for two families, and so hopefully, I'll be able to work at least till his kids get old enough to help him out so he can, because that's some of the things I see on some of these farms where the senior just moves off the farm and here you go, and I'm going to take the easy street, and which I think I've got the easy street now, but and the young guy just is beating his head against the wall because there's just, you're young and there's just a lot of work to make this thing pay.
Well, then there's also the dynamic of there's enough for two people here, I'm sure. But it's probably hard to balance out enough work for the both of you at some points at time too. So how have you been able to, without stepping out of the picture, but turning over responsibilities to Jay, how have you been able to manage that?
Well, I did a lot of thinking before we did it, trying to figure out, where do we go from here, or what do we do, and how do we. So I came to the conclusion, the cows are our income. You've got to learn how to manage the cows and the pastures if you're going to be an organic farmer. So I turned all the cow management over to Jay, calves and cows. He'll get all the rations. It's his decision how we feed him, even though he'll ask a lot of questions, of course, but it's his decision. He's got the final word. And so once he gets that conquered, we'll probably start getting paperwork. I do all the paperwork. I'm the guy that sits at the desk. And if I'm a little tired, I'll just tell him I got paperwork, and he doesn't know what I'm doing. So nap time. But anyhow. No, but and part of that is because all this paperwork, being certified, and we've also involved in some financial groups, all that came along a little bit at a time. So to me, I've heard a couple of young farmers overheard how they've been so overwhelmed with the paperwork, how much they spend in the house. And when you're young, energetic, you want to be working. And it's hard to sit down and get your paperwork done. So I do that, and my wife and I, we do the milking. It's easy to go out in the parlor and milk 60 cows and go back in the house. And he'll get the calves and all the feeding and changing of fences out in pasture. And I do a lot of field work. With we farm with horses, it's always that thing of harnessing 8 horses, which is not a easy job for a 55-year-old, but for a 22-year-old, it's not bad. So by the time I got my breakfast down, he's got those ready for me, and out in the field I go. And I don't know, I think I got it pretty nice, but maybe
So
I don't.
you milk morning and evening?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, that's not a. Being to live down the road, it's kind of tough for Michelle to come up to help with chores, but she does. But now they had a little baby about 2 weeks ago, 2.5 weeks ago. So how we work that, and we just think we just think this is so great. She knows how to milk, and if we want to take off for a day or two, we go. She'll come up and milk, and chores will go on. It's not that big a task that they can handle it. So she's our pinch hitter. We're baling hay or something. She'll come up, help my wife, Lena, do the milking, and we'll keep on going. We've probably got it about as nice now as we'll ever have it. I mean, we just swap off. If they want to take off, go out for supper or whatever they want to do. That's another thing we do, the milking, because that is more where we got to be there certain times. And at our age, that's not that big a deal. We've been doing it for as long as we've been around, so that's not a big deal. But, their friends, they want to go out for supper at 5 o'clock. Well, and they can. He can do all his chores, and he can leave, and we'll do the milking. We don't interfere with each other. And that's how I wanted to structure this with our chores, is so we don't interfere with each other. Because I've heard that from other families where it says, well, Dad was out saying, well, come on, we got to get going. And he wanted to sit in the house with his family for a little bit yet. So if we want to oversleep, we can oversleep. We do not interfere with each other. He can get his chores done, go home, and we can still milk. He gets the cows up. They'll be in the holding pen for us. And when we get out to milk, we get out to milk. And if he oversleeps, we can get the cows and milk, and he can still do his chores. That way we don't get into each other's hairs, and we don't have to have a schedule where we got to be there or somebody's going to be upset. It just eliminates another whatever you want to call a place where
That could eliminate friction big time. That's a really interesting dynamic, because I had never heard of that, because when you see the next generation take over, you see them kind of just doing everything together, and then especially with a son-in-law and the dad, all of a sudden the dad feels maybe a little bit disrespected, or, so I think that is a great way to do it, because he can do his thing, you guys can do your thing, and you work as a team, but you're not going to interfere with each other or screw each other's plans up. I think that's brilliant. I had actually never heard of anybody else doing that before.
Well, that was part of because I've been involved in a mentor group for quite a few years. And some of these farms we go to where there are successions, there's quite a I don't know what disrespect for each other because of some of this stuff. And part of that also came from when I was working with Dad. He sold his farm for I bought an undivided half farm. He priced it. I bought an undivided half, and I could buy the other half whenever I wanted to. And he told me, now you pay all the taxes, you pay all repairs, and if you want to put up buildings, you put up buildings, but there'll be no rent. You just use the other half. He said, that way I won't be telling you I'm not going to invest in buildings because I won't get my money back. That way I won't hold you back. You can do as you please and it will not affect me. So some of that came from back then, because I thought back and thought, well, Dad and I came along pretty well, so what all happened back there that this was possible? So that was also part of the picture back then that I gleaned off, and that was part why we wanted to milk and he do not to interfere with each other.
Well, that's kind of cool. It goes back actually another generation where the seed was already planted on kind of staying out of your way, and how that evolved into this generation. That's really neat.
Mm-hmm. Well, I always said, and I still say it, if Dad was as bullheaded as I am, we'd have never gotten along. So that helps me to think back, what did he do? Mm-hmm. That it worked. And that has helped me tremendously. in making some of these plans.
But the one thing I'm looking at, not to throw water on the fire at all, but just, like you said, with you guys milking, that's a set time every day that the cows have to be milked. And as you turn that over to Jay and Michelle, now they're going to have to be here every day. How do you see that transitioning? I mean, I know it seems like a small thing, but I know you've thought of this, and that they're going to have to be here every day, and they might miss a few dinners with friends. Or are you thinking that by the time you're ready to step back from that, they'll kind of have their routines or friends set in place or whatever? I don't know. I'm just kind of curious on how that whole dynamic of turning things over, more and more responsibilities, and the things that they got to be here for, that they might be able to kind of get out of right now.
Well, we never know what the future holds. But, Mom and Dad are 80, and, once they pass on, we'll be moving into that house, and Jay and Michelle will be moving up in our house. Then both of us will be on the farm. So that, as the kids grow older, if they have a family, they get tied down with their family. Mm-hmm. They don't want to go out for supper with 5 kids. I mean, there's a time in your life when you just want to raise your family, and, we'll go camping out. We got a pond area back there and do things like that. So as the kids grow older, there'll be, the way I think it's probably going to happen is once this mom and dad aren't here anymore, which we don't know how long that'll be, but when they move up is probably when some of that's going to happen, because then they'll be here to do it, and I'll take a responsibility of some of the other chores. And by that time, they'll have bigger children. In our parlor, 10-year-olds, my granddaughters, 8 and 10-year-old, they'll milk 40 cows almost by themselves. They'll go out and get started, and then either mom or dad will arrive in the parlor and help them finish. So the Amish, I think, are really, they have their kids involved in a lot more so probably. I don't know, I guess, but I don't see that as being a problem, because they know how it is. I mean, I don't see that as a problem, but it could be. I don't know.
Mm-hmm. But it's going to be kind of a natural evolution of the next generation stepping in, to where about the time, down the road when you move to the Dowdy house, the grandpa and grandma house, Jay's will move here, and then they'll start, the roles, your guys' roles will probably start reversing a little bit. Then as their kids grow older, you guys kind of transition away, and I think it's an absolutely beautiful way of transitioning the farm to the next generation, because you're never cutting out Dad and everything that he's done to get the farm where it is today. You let him be involved and be a mentor all the way through. And I think that's just the way a succession should be.
Well, I think you're right, Mike, on that. That's kind of what I see, or hopefully that can happen. Because Dad, that was in '96, I think, when he wanted that. I can't remember exactly what happened. I think we had low milk prices and money was awful tight. He said, well, I'll just back out of the operation and I'll go get a job. He didn't really want to, but actually it worked out great. Our oldest child was like 10 years old, and every 2 years we had another one. So they were at the prime age when Dad stepped back. They took more responsibilities, and Dad had more free time in the evening. If you wanted to go to one of the kids for supper, they went. And that's one of the things I struggled with when that transition was made. So that's something I'll talk about with Jay when we get there, or I think I will. In my mind, when he got home from work, he should come out and help me do work or do some chores, because Dad always did. And he'd stay in the house, and I'd be fuming sometimes about, why isn't he coming out? But, as time went on, all of a sudden you realized it's not his, it's mine. And he's got that's not none of his responsibility. It's mine. It's my responsibility. And that's something we could have talked about back then that would have helped out, you know. So that's something now hopefully we'll talk about when we get there is, you know, it's yours. I'll help what I can, but.
You know, I heard a really great quote from David Hirschberg a while back. He said, lack of communication leads to a vivid imagination.
Oh, that's exciting.
And ever since he told me that, I've talked to Kevin Kino about it. Like, that is the most accurate quote I've heard in a long time. It's the unknown that you start running with, and it's like, well, Dad, he just doesn't, he's ticked off about me. He doesn't want to come out and help. No, he's probably just tired from work and decided it's your farm, right?
Exactly. Once you get the age I'm at now, and that's what he was back then, I can understand why he was tired. Tired gets a new meaning. You know, it just does. You're tired. You know, you want to sit down and rest. So, and that communication is something we've always joked about our neighbors when we were going to school. They had father and son working there, and we joke about it. If they work as much as they stand and talk, they might get something done. But really, that's so important. And we seen it when I started working with Dad. We'd stand there. We'd be planning the next day. We, you know, what are your plans? What are you thinking? And that's what we do now. I spoke at a meeting the other week about succession, and the guy said, "Do you have every Monday morning your LLC meeting?" He says, "No, we probably have it every day." You know, we do. We talk a lot about plans because, to me, that is so important. That I know what Jay is thinking and he knows what I'm thinking. Because if you don't, it's that vivid imagination. Now you might do something you never thought of that it's going to irk him and he just didn't know.
Now, going back all the way to when you started thinking succession, 10 years ago or whatever, did you at any point think, well, I think he's going to be interested or she's going to be interested, and were you surprised when it ended up being Jay? Or did you never really have any of the kids picked, you know, not picked as the favorite, but expected they would be the ones to take over?
Not really. Not really. You know how our kids are as they get older and go through their teenage years, and sometimes you think they don't care a lick or whatever, but I think they did. Of course, they're all different. Some had strengths in one part and weakness in another, and vice versa. And I don't know. I know I had some thoughts on some of them. That's certain, because someone get more verbal when they are pretty sure of themselves.
Teenagers that know everything? Yeah.
But I don't know. I don't know. I hate really. No, not really. But I remember with Jay, and, you know, he was on a youth panel at the grazing conference that Jerry D had moderated. I don't remember. You probably don't remember.
I don't remember that.
When he was 16 years old, they had a youth panel, farmer youth, 3 of them, and that was the year that he had that he went and got a job, because my next one in line was out of school. That's kind of how they worked that, and he actually almost regretted going and getting a job and going, and I think it was good for all the boys. Every last one of them had a job off the farm, at least. Well, Jay had probably about 4 years that he worked off the farm, and it's a great experience for him. And I remember thinking back then, as you know, he'd probably make a good farmer for how well he liked it. But the others did too, so.
That is one dynamic in this area specifically, is the trailer factories, and the amount of money that they pay can certainly turn somebody who might seem like a real good farmer or really interested in farming when they're younger, and suddenly they're making big money at one of these trailer factories. And yeah, they might not find it so easy to give that money up. as tough as it is to say that, but that can change the minds of a lot of young folks until it seems like they suddenly hit this certain point. I don't know what age it is, 25, 26, 27, somewhere in there it might be. And suddenly farming seems like it's a great thing again because they're their own boss.
Well, that happened to my oldest son. When he was like 17 years old, he went and got a job, and I really thought I needed him on the farm yet, but he was at the age where he wanted a job. So finally he did want a job, and he told me that day, he says, Dad, he says, I just never want to farm. I just don't. That's just not my cup of tea. I thought, well, maybe it is. And not everybody's cut out to be a farmer, and some people farm that aren't cut out to be farmers. And it's just what it is. And anyhow, he got married, and about 4 years later, after he was married, he came home and he said, well, Dad, I want you to know, I'll probably never get a chance at the farm being I'm the oldest one, but if you want me to move home tomorrow, I'll move home tomorrow and help you. So that felt good.
Because 17-year-olds might not make all the greatest statements. So when he said that at 17 years old, you got to wait till they're in their low 20s, then all of a sudden, as dad, you start knowing more again.
Yeah, well, I appreciated that, him come back telling me that, and he realizes, and he made the remark to me, if you could have just told a stupid 17-year-old something, but that's part of growing up. We go through those years, and the Amish are not exempt from that, going through that and trying to make up their mind what they want to do. And like you said, Brian, with the wages, we got a worker shortage here, and they pay big bucks. And you really do. If you want to work for 35 hours a week, you can have life fairly easy if you really want to. But they're finding out, if they grew up on a farm, that longing for a farm, actually, I don't think ever leaves somebody. I just don't think it does. And the boys always had their ponies, and we've got 55 acres of woods back there, and they spent umpteen hours back there playing games. And I don't know, it's farm succession. I don't know how to explain this or how do I get into it, but it doesn't start the day you start farming your succession. It starts when they're growing up, so they understand what's going on. Even one of the boys, after he was married, he got home, he jumped on a horse and rode back there, and he said, when he came up, he said, boy, I just felt like a little kid again. So, it's... I don't know, sometimes, when they're young and you think they're just goofing off, farming's not just all about farming either. So we need our, they need time to play, and I think that helps.
Mm-hmm. I know, looking back, growing up on a farm, during my teenage years, I didn't want to be a farmer. But now looking back, oh man, do I want to farm. But the memories that you make as a family working together and doing stuff on a farm are the memories that I will cherish my whole life. The vacations we took, those were fine and dandy, but the working together as a family on the farm are the memories I'll cherish the most the rest of my life. And I think as we get older, hopefully we can pass those memories, the same memories, on to our kids. And it's not about going on a very glitzy vacation or anything like that. It's the family dynamic that builds the memories. And I don't think there's a better place to raise a family than a farm where everybody's involved when they're growing up.
When they work, when they think they got to work too hard.
Mm-hmm.
And it does. You're correct. It makes memories, and they had a lot of fun growing up, and I think we need to be responsible for our kids when they do grow, so they got the right. I don't know. The other day when I had that talk, one guy asked us, "Oh, what did you do that all your kids wanted to farm?" Well, he caught me off guard. My wife and I talked about this, and what did we do? Well, I don't know what we did. But I remember one thing that we had talked about is we chose to farm. So why are we complaining all the time about farming? Let's be optimistic. We chose this. If we don't want to farm, well, let's go do something else. If a guy's saying, well, you're not a farmer, you don't know how it is, well, why is he farming? We always enjoyed farming. We always, I don't know, it's just, well, always, I shouldn't say always, because sometimes we had days we wonder why we were farming, but I think being optimistic and being part of OB, of course, we started grazing, that was a thing, then we went organic, and you got to make money too. And being part of OB helped that situation tremendously. And if you can be profitable, money isn't everything, but it does help.
Well, when you look at the next generation succession, are you seeing more since Organic Valley and Horizon have moved into this area? Are there more of the next generation interested in continuing farming than there were before?
Most definitely. I just, we're certified 11 years now, and we were the first ones. Now we got like 120 to 140 farms, and the farms were dying out pretty fast. And there's farms coming back who are supporting families who hadn't supported a family for at least one generation. So that is, to me, that is just awesome. And that's part of the reason, I guess, why I'm involved with OB as much as I am, because, I really like to see this thing keep going, because it's our future. Mm-hmm. It is our future. That's all we got.
And I think we've seen the same impact in Holmes County, Ohio, where Organic Valley coming into those communities has had an unbelievable impact on the next generation of farmers. Because no matter how good you or your kids might like farming, if there's not enough money, the interest, you can't love something enough to do it and go in the hole.
And another thing that really helped us out with OB coming in is the culture that came with it. To me, that was just, it was such a perfect fit for what we were taught, and the culture of OB, caring for each other and so forth. That helped tremendously on that part. And this farming succession, what we got on the farm here, I can't even imagine what this would be like if we wouldn't have OB prices, because we wouldn't be doing this. Or organic prices, I should say.
But it comes back to, like you said, we were talking about several different aspects. You got the financial side, and you got the succession side. And what is success? I mean, one can't happen without the other. If you don't have that financial success, then you can't see your kids have those memories that you talked about. It's just not possible.
That's very correct. That's very correct. Another thing I like about, the succession part comes in, and staying on the farm, is the mixing of multi-generations. If I see my grandkids walking with my dad, which is their great-grandfather, there's a lot of I don't know how you say it. There's a lot of experience. There's there's differences as generation to generation. We can help that gap if we can somehow instill the respect. If they can get a huge respect for their great-grandfather and ask them some questions, or just have memories of him, will help out tremendously in buffering their I'm searching for a word, their actions, or their willingness to change things dramatically. I don't know what the right word is for that, but
well, I think I think I know what you're getting at. You got a young child who's innocent and full of joy, and then you got the wisdom of a great grandfather, and seeing that
Yeah.
that meld together is just something else.
Well, I think it's just huge, and that's why I like to stay on the farm. Not that I'm thinking that I got that much wisdom, but as we get older, we mellow out a little bit, and when you're young, you're like you said, you're there. So, and I think that multi-generation thing to me is huge in bonding, even on the farm. At one time when we were younger, started grazing, we kept reading stories about selling the farm and moving off to cheaper land. It's just common, it's business sense. But we here on this farm, we've got roots. We've got a little graveyard back here where I think it's like 5 or 6 great-great-great-grandfather is buried. He was buried there in 1856. So it's not always been the father, the son, or direct family, but it's been cousins, uncles, and so forth. So we're farming the land that our forefathers cleared. So it's not a matter of just moving off, and you don't do that. I think it's not sacred. We don't want to worship it, but it's almost. Mm-hmm. In my mind, the more history, and that's another thing we tried to do is talk a lot about history of the farm. Because the more you talk about history, the deeper your roots go. The more they know about the farm, the farther they go down. And I think that is so important that we talk about history, what happened here on the farm. All the people that I could share some stories on that, but it's just, it's real interesting.
Because it's not just a piece of property that's worth a lot of money. It's a farm that is generational and has been handed down, and I think anybody that grows up on a farm like that feels that tie. My brother-in-law bought mom and dad's farm and completely happy with it, but that farm will always have a special place in my heart for it because, when I was a little kid, I'd sit on Grandpa's lap and he'd tell me all the stories about the farm that, when they moved there first. And it's, I don't know, I know what it would appraise at, and I don't care about that. It better always be a farm.
Well, that's that multi-generation thing and history, and that's some of the things that are very important to me. We haven't wrote everything down yet, but we do have a lot of history here on my mom's side. I don't know if I want to get into this or not, but it's...
Go ahead.
Years ago, my father-in-law was reading in the Budget, which is an Amish paper. That's all the settlements in the United States are close right into kind of what's happening. And my wife, Lena, her mom came from Kansas. They moved in from Kansas when she was 14, and she passed away this spring when she was 90, and she was 91 years old. So her name was Nisley, and the Nisleys they came from Kansas. And he read in the Budget that a little rocking chair got sold at an auction, that the Nisleys moved to Kansas when they moved into Kansas. And it brought like $300. Anyhow, this little girl was at her neighbor's, the Sun-Timers, and got this rocking chair. The Sun-Timers got it out of the attic, told her to take it home to Dad and get it fixed and she can have it. So she did. Anyhow, there was only ever one Amish Sun-Timer in the community that we knew of, and that was at our next door neighbor here where we live today. So we started digging in, and so we found out the Nisleys had lived at this very farm before they moved to Kansas. And his name was Dan Nisley that had lived here, and his wife's maiden name was Lena Miller, and that's my wife's name, Lena Miller. There was only one Lena in between. So he was actually married or named after the Lena that had lived here on this farm before they moved to Kansas. So 100 years later, Lena comes back home. So that
Wow.
So that's history. That. Mm-hmm. So that.
They say history is going to repeat itself, right?
So some of those stuff like that, after you read that, you hear that, you go out and stand in your fields and you look over these hills and thinking, so the farm it's got roots.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's why why the family wants to keep it. And I think knowing all that stuff helps with succession.
Very interesting.
Yeah. Any other questions you can think of?
I don't think so. I'm just found this really great because succession to me is a hurdle for a lot of people, and it can be an absolutely beautiful thing, but it can also turn into a family divisive issue. So to hear how you did it was really, really great to hear, because there's so many different ways to do it, but the way you did it really makes sense, and I really appreciate it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Thanks, Pete. Anything else you want to add?
Well, not really. All this, if you're thinking succession, think ahead and try to plan, which I guess that is succession. So I don't know. Yeah. It's been interesting. It's been very interesting, I thought. But hopefully it'll work out. That's all I can say.
Well, we hope it works out for you too. And thanks a lot for sharing.
Thanks a lot, Pete.